The ballroom inside the luxury hotel sparkled with crystal lights, expensive suits, and the quiet confidence of the world's richest people. Waiters moved carefully between tables, while cameras flashed near the stage where Billionaire CEO Kareem Al-Hassan stood surrounded by investors and reporters. Known for building one of the biggest tech companies in the Middle East, Kareem was respected for his sharp mind, feared for his cold attitude, and admired by millions online. To the public, he looked like the perfect success story. But behind the cameras, people whispered a different story about the powerful businessman who rarely treated ordinary workers with kindness. Near the back of the ballroom, a young black maid named Amara quietly cleaned a table after a guest accidentally spilled coffee across the white cloth. She kept her eyes down and worked quickly, trying not to attract attention. Most guests barely noticed her presence, and honestly, she preferred it that way. Amara had spent years working long shifts at the hotel after moving far from home to support her family. She spoke softly, smiled politely, and avoided conflict whenever possible. But that night was different. As Kareem walked past with several wealthy guests beside him, his eyes landed on Amara kneeling beside the table. He stopped suddenly, irritation crossing his face after noticing a small stain left on the floor. Without thinking twice, he muttered something sharply in Arabic, believing she wouldn't understand a single word. "What kind of hotel hires people like this?" he said coldly in Arabic. "She probably doesn't even understand what professionalism means." A few nearby businessmen laughed quietly. One woman looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. Amara froze for a moment with the cleaning cloth still in her hand. The room around her suddenly felt smaller. She had heard comments like that before from strangers who assumed she was invisible. But this time, something in Kareem's voice hit differently. Maybe it was because everyone around him seemed too afraid to speak up. Or maybe it was because he thought she couldn't understand him at all. Slowly, Amara stood to her feet. The laughter around the group faded as she calmly looked directly at Kareem. Her voice was steady, respectful, and unexpectedly fluent as she answered him back in perfect Arabic. "Respect," she said quietly, "is also part of professionalism, sir." The entire hallway went silent. One businessman nearly dropped his drink. Another stared at Amara in complete shock. Kareem's confident expression disappeared instantly as he realized every word he had spoken had been understood perfectly. For the first time that evening, the billionaire CEO had no response. But Amara wasn't finished. She took a slow breath and looked at him with calm eyes that carried years of hidden pain, strength, and experience. Then she said something else in Arabic that made Kareem's face lose all color completely. Because the words she spoke next revealed a connection between them, a connection the billionaire had spent years trying to forget. Kareem stared at Amara as the noise of the ballroom slowly returned around them. The wealthy guests pretended to continue their conversations, but almost everyone nearby was secretly listening now. The billionaire CEO, who normally controlled every room with confidence, suddenly looked unsettled. His jaw tightened as memories he had buried years ago began creeping back into his mind. Amara lowered her eyes again and picked up the cleaning cloth from the floor, as if nothing unusual had happened. But the silence between them felt heavy. Kareem watched her carefully now, no longer seeing just a hotel maid standing in front of him. There was something familiar in her voice, something that pulled him back to a chapter of his life he had worked hard to erase. "You speak Arabic very well," one of the investors said awkwardly, trying to break the tension. Amara gave a polite nod. "I lived in Dubai for several years," she answered softly. Kareem's eyes narrowed slightly. Dubai. That single word hit him harder than anyone realized. Nearly 12 years earlier, before becoming one of the most powerful CEOs in the business world, Kareem had spent most of his time building his company from a tiny office in Dubai. Back then, he wasn't surrounded by bodyguard reporters or luxury hotels. He was just an ambitious young entrepreneur struggling to keep his business alive. Very few people from that period still remained in his life. In fact, Kareem had made sure of that. Amara quietly stepped away with her cleaning cart, but Kareem couldn't stop looking at her. The closer he studied her face, the more uncomfortable he became. It wasn't just a language. It was the way she spoke with calm confidence despite being publicly insulted. Most people became nervous around him. She didn't. One of Kareem's assistants leaned closer. "Sir, The media interview starts in 5 minutes. Kareem didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question that surprised everyone around him. "What did you mean by your last comment?" he asked Amara in Arabic. The room grew quiet again. Amara stopped walking but didn't turn around right away. For a few seconds, she simply stood there holding the edge of the cleaning cart tightly. Then she slowly faced him again. "My mother used to work for a man exactly like you," she said calmly in Arabic. "Powerful, respected, feared. A man who believed poor people were invisible." A strange look crossed Kareem's face. The older investor standing beside him laughed nervously. "This is getting too personal." But Kareem raised his hand slightly, stopping him from speaking. Amara continued carefully. "She worked long hours for wealthy families in Dubai while raising me alone. Most people ignored her existence. But she always told me something important." Her voice softened. She said one day I would meet a man whose success was built on secrets. Kareem's expression hardened instantly. For the first time all evening, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. Across the ballroom, cameras continued flashing while guests whispered among themselves, sensing drama without understanding the full story. A few hotel employees nervously watched from the corners, worried the situation could cost Amara her job. But Amara remained calm. Then Kareem stepped closer and lowered his voice. "What is your mother's name?" he asked quietly in Arabic. Amara looked directly into his eyes. "Samira." The color drained from Kareem's face so quickly that even his assistant noticed. Because Samira was not just a random name from his past. It was the name of the woman connected to the biggest secret of his entire life, a secret that disappeared the same year he became a billionaire. Kareem quickly looked around the ballroom to make sure nobody else understood the Arabic conversation happening between them. Most guests had returned to their dinners and business discussions, but the tension near the entrance still lingered in the air. His assistant, Nadia, stood close beside him with growing concern. She had worked with Kareem for 6 years and had never seen him lose control like this before. "Sir, the interview cannot wait any longer," she reminded him quietly. But Kareem barely heard her. His mind had already traveled back more than a decade to the crowded streets of old Dubai, where he spent sleepless nights trying to save his struggling startup company. Back then, Samira had worked in the same office building as a cleaner. Unlike everyone else, she never treated him like a future billionaire or an important businessman. She spoke honestly, noticed details others ignored, and often stayed late cleaning the empty offices while Kareem worked alone through the night. At first, she had simply been part of the background of his difficult years. But over time, their conversations became longer. Samira was educated, intelligent, and surprisingly fluent in several languages, including Arabic, English, and French. She once dreamed of becoming a teacher before family hardships forced her into low-paying jobs. Kareem remembered how she used to encourage him during the darkest moments of his career. "You are chasing success so hard," she once told him, "that one day you may forget who you really are." At the time, he laughed it off. Now those words echoed painfully in his head. Across the ballroom, Amara quietly resumed her work, but she could feel Kareem watching her constantly. Part of her wanted to walk away and avoid reopening old wounds. But another part of her had waited years for this moment. Back in the employee hallway, 2 hotel workers whispered nervously. "Do you know who that man is?" One asked. "That's Kareem Al-Hassan. He owns companies worth billions." "And Amara spoke to him like that?" The other worker shook her head slowly. "She's brave. Or maybe she knows something." The truth was, even hotel staff knew very little about Amara. She kept to herself, rarely talked about her past, and worked extra shifts without complaining. Some employees assumed she was simply trying to support her family overseas. Nobody knew she spent most nights translating old documents and searching online archives connected to Kareem's company history. For years, Amara had quietly collected pieces of a story her mother never fully explained before passing away. A story involving missing financial records, a business partnership that disappeared overnight, and a fire in a small Dubai office building that was officially ruled an accident. But according to Samira, it wasn't an accident at all. Near the stage, Kareem finally stepped away from the crowd and motioned for Amara to follow him into a quieter private corridor beside the ballroom. Nadia immediately looked uncomfortable. "Sir, this could become a problem if the media notices," she warned. Kareem's voice turned cold again, though less confident than before. "Handle the reporters." Amara hesitated for a second before following him down the hallway. The sound of the party faded behind them as the doors slowly closed. Security cameras watched silently from the ceiling, while hotel staff passed nervously without making eye contact. Once they were alone, Kareem turned toward her sharply. "What exactly did your mother tell you about me?" he asked. Amara studied his face carefully before answering. "She told me you weren't the man the world thinks you are." Kareem's jaw tightened. Then Amara reached into the pocket of her uniform and slowly pulled out an old photograph with folded edges. The moment Kareem saw it, his breathing stopped, because the man standing beside him in that picture was someone officially declared dead 11 years ago. Kareem grabbed the photograph with trembling fingers, staring at it as if the image itself might suddenly disappear. The old picture showed 3 people standing outside a small office building in Dubai many years earlier. A younger Kareem stood beside Samira, both smiling faintly at the camera. But it was the third person in the photo that changed everything. Omar Rahman, the former business partner nobody had spoken about in over a decade. Official records claimed Omar died during the office fire that nearly destroyed Kareem's first company. Newspapers called it a tragic accident caused by faulty wiring. Investors moved on. The public forgot. And as Kareem's wealth and power grew, the story slowly disappeared from public memory. But now the past was standing directly in front of him again through the hands of a hotel maid. "Where did you get this?" Kareem asked quietly, though his voice carried clear panic. Amara carefully folded her arms. "My mother kept it hidden for years." Kareem looked down the hallway, checking if anyone was nearby, even in the privacy of the corridor. His billionaire confidence seemed to crack more with every second. The powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms around the world suddenly looked like a man trapped between fear and guilt. "You shouldn't have brought this here," he muttered. Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then maybe you should have told the truth years ago." Before Kareem could answer, his phone began vibrating nonstop in his pocket. Nadia's name flashed across the screen again and again. He ignored the first call, then the second, but finally he answered with visible frustration. "What?" he snapped. Nadia's voice sounded tense. "Sir, reporters are asking questions. Someone recorded the interaction in the ballroom. Clips are already spreading online." Kareem closed his eyes for a moment. "What clips?" "The part where you spoke to the maid in Arabic." Nadia hesitated carefully. "People are reacting strongly. Some guests recognize the language." Amara looked away silently while Kareem's face darkened. For a man whose public image was built on discipline and control, this was dangerous. His company stock depended heavily on investor trust, media reputation, and global partnerships. One scandal could cost millions overnight. But that was what scared him most. It was the photograph still in his hand. Back in the ballroom, guests whispered while several reporters quietly searched for answers. Some recognized Amara from the viral video already spreading online. Others became curious about why Kareem suddenly disappeared from his own charity event. Cameras shifted toward the hallway doors every few seconds, waiting. Meanwhile, one older journalist, sitting near the stage, stared closely at the pause video on his phone. The moment Amara mentioned Dubai, something clicked in his memory. He quickly searched an old archived article from 11 years earlier. A fire, a missing financial case, a dead business partner, and one surviving young entrepreneur named Kareem Al-Hassan. The journalist slowly leaned back in shock. In the hallway, Kareem lowered his voice again. "You have no idea what really happened back then." "Then explain it," Amara replied. For a long moment, Kareem said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the photograph as memories crashed through his mind. The smoke, the alarms, Omar shouting somewhere inside the building, and Samira crying outside in the street afterward. Then another memory surfaced. A locked briefcase, hidden financial files, and a promise Kareem made that night which he never kept. "You think I became a billionaire because I'm smarter than everyone else?" Kareem said bitterly. "You think powerful people survive by telling the truth?" Amara remained calm, but her heartbeat quickened. She could feel the story getting closer to the answers her mother spent years protecting. Still, something about Kareem's expression unsettled her. He looked less like a cruel businessman now, and more like someone carrying fear for a very long time. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Nadia rushed toward them, breathing hard. "Sir," she said urgently, "security just stopped someone downstairs." Kareem frowned. "Who?" Nadia swallowed nervously before answering. "A man claiming to be Omar Rahman." The moment Nadia spoke those words, the entire hallway seemed to freeze. Kareem stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible." Nadia looked shaken herself. Security thought he was mentally unstable at first, but he knew details about you, about the company, and about the Dubai fire that were never released publicly. Amara's pulse quickened. For years, she had searched for answers surrounding Omar Rahman's disappearance. Her mother always believed Omar never died in the fire, but nobody ever listened. Every official report said the same thing: deceased, case closed, tragedy forgotten. And now, somehow, he was downstairs inside the hotel. Kareem suddenly stepped forward. "Where is he now?" In a private security office near the parking entrance, Nadia answered. "But there's another problem." Kareem's patience snapped. "What now?" Nadia lowered her voice carefully. "Someone leaked old financial records online 10 minutes ago. Reporters are connecting your company to missing investment funds from the Dubai years." Amara looked directly at Kareem. The billionaire CEO who once looked untouchable now seemed surrounded from every side. The viral video from the ballroom was already damaging his public image, but financial accusations tied to a dead business partner could destroy far more than his reputation. Investors, journalists, and social media influencers were already digging through his company history in real time. Kareem ran a hand across his face, trying to think clearly. "Who leaked the files?" "We don't know yet," Nadia admitted, "but reporters downstairs are asking if Omar Rahman is alive." The hallway fell silent again. Amara slowly realized something important. None of this felt random anymore. The timing was too perfect. The viral video, the leaked records, Omar suddenly appearing after 11 years. It felt planned. But by who? Before anyone could speak again, Kareem's phone buzzed with new notification. His expression darkened as he opened a news alert. One major business network had already published a breaking headline: "Billionaire CEO linked to reopen Dubai fire mystery." Below, it was a screenshot from the ballroom video showing Kareem speaking harshly to Amara moments before her fluent Arabic response shocked everyone around them. Within minutes, comments online exploded. Some people criticized Kareem's behavior toward a hotel maid. Others became obsessed with the deeper mystery connected to the old fire and missing partner. Clips spread rapidly across social media platforms, turning the luxury charity event into an international scandal overnight. "You should leave before this gets worse," Nadia whispered to Amara quietly. "People like Kareem don't survive scandals by playing fair." But Amara didn't move. For too long, powerful people had controlled the story while ordinary workers stayed silent. Her mother spent years afraid, constantly watching over her shoulder after the fire. Even before her death, Samira refused to fully explain what happened that night. The fear never left her. Now Amara was beginning to understand why. Kareem suddenly looked at her with intense seriousness. "If Omar is really here, then everything you think you know may be wrong." Amara frowned. "What does that mean?" Kareem hesitated for the first time. Then he quietly said something that completely changed the situation. "Your mother wasn't just a witness." Amara felt her stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" But before Kareem could answer, a loud argument erupted from the far end of the hallway. Two security guards hurried past, while speaking urgently into radios. Guests inside the ballroom started noticing commotion. Reporters moved toward the hotel entrance, sensing something major was happening. Then Nadia's phone rang again. She answered quickly, listened for several seconds, and turned pale. "He's gone," she whispered. Kareem's eyes widened. "Who's gone?" "Omar." Amara stepped closer. "How does someone disappear from hotel security?" Nadia swallowed hard before answering. "He left behind a message." Kareem grabbed her phone immediately. On the screen was a blurry photo taken seconds earlier from the security office. It showed an older man wearing a dark coat and baseball cap standing beside the exit door. His face was partly hidden, but one detail was impossible to miss. The burn scar running along the side of his neck, exactly like the scar visible in the old photograph Amara carried from her mother. Under the photo was a handwritten note. Ask Kareem what really happened to the briefcase. Kareem stared at the message on Nadia's phone as if the words themselves were dragging him back into a nightmare he had spent years escaping. His hands trembled slightly before he slowly lowered the screen. Amara noticed it immediately. For the first time since confronting him, she no longer saw only arrogance in the billionaire CEO's face. She saw regret. "What briefcase?" she demanded. Kareem looked down the empty hallway, making sure nobody else could hear them. The noise from reporters and hotel guests echoed faintly in the distance, but in that moment, everything around them felt far away. "The fire wasn't supposed to happen," he admitted quietly. Amara's eyes narrowed. 11 years ago, Omar discovered someone inside our company was stealing investor money through fake accounts. Millions were disappearing. He collected proof inside a black briefcase containing financial files, contracts, and names. Kareem paused heavily. Powerful names. Amara listened silently while Nadia stood frozen beside them. Omar planned to expose everything publicly, Kareem continued. But before he could, someone found out. "The fire," Amara whispered. Kareem nodded slowly. "That night, the office was set on fire intentionally. Omar called me from inside the building after the alarm started. He told me to save the briefcase before the evidence disappeared forever." Amara's heartbeat quickened. "Did you?" Kareem closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." The answer hit harder than she expected. For years, the world believed Omar died protecting company secrets, Kareem said bitterly. But he survived a fire and disappeared because the people behind the fraud wanted him dead. "And you?" Amara asked carefully. "What did you do?" Kareem finally looked directly at her. "I was afraid." The hallway fell silent. "I told myself I would expose everything later," he admitted. "But after the fire, investors suddenly pushed me into leadership. The company exploded in value. Money, power, fame, it all came faster than I imagined. Every year it became harder to tell the truth." Amara shook her head slowly in disbelief. "So you stayed silent while my mother lived in fear for years?" Kareem's voice lowered. "Your mother knew about the briefcase. Omar trusted her because she helped organize company records after hours. When the fire happened, she begged me to release the evidence publicly." His face tightened with guilt. "Instead, I hid it." Before Mara could answer, footsteps echoed behind them again. This time it wasn't security. An older man slowly stepped from the shadows near the emergency exit at the end of the corridor. His dark coat was soaked from the rain outside, and a faded burn scar stretched along his neck, exactly like the one in the photograph. "Omar Rahman." Nadia gasped softly. Kareem looked completely stunned. "You finally told part of the truth," Omar said calmly. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Amara stared at the man her mother spent years searching for. He looked older, tired, but very alive. His eyes shifted toward her gently. "You look like your mother," he said quietly. Amara felt tears forming, but held herself together. Omar then turned toward Kareem. "Do you still have it?" Kareem hesitated before slowly nodding, without another word. He reached inside his suit jacket and pulled out a small silver key attached to an old chain. "The briefcase has been locked in a private vault for 11 years, he admitted. Nadia looked shocked. "You kept the evidence this whole time?" Kareem answered without pride. "I kept telling myself I was protecting the company. But really, I was protecting myself." Omar stepped closer. "Then end it tonight." The sounds of reporters grew louder outside the corridor as breaking news continued spreading online. Kareem looked toward the ballroom filled with wealthy investors, cameras, and people who believed they knew him. Then he made his decision. For the first time in years, the billionaire CEO walked toward the ballroom not to protect his image, but to destroy the lies surrounding it. Minutes later, standing before cameras and stunned guests, Kareem publicly confessed the truth about the fire, the hidden evidence, and the corruption buried inside the company for over a decade. Reporters rushed forward while investors stared in disbelief. Social media exploded again, but this time the story was no longer about a billionaire insulting a hotel maid. It was about a maid whose courage forced the truth into the light. But just as Amara finally felt her mother's long search for justice was over, Omar quietly handed her a sealed envelope before disappearing into the crowd again. Confused, she opened it slowly. Inside was a DNA test, and the name listed under father made her knees nearly give out. Kareem Al-Hassan. Amara could barely breathe as she stared at the paper in her trembling hands. The sounds of reporters shouting questions inside the ballroom faded into the background. Her mind replayed every moment from the night over and over again. The insult in Arabic, the hidden photograph, the fire, the missing briefcase, and now this. Kareem stood a few feet away, watching her silently. For the first time since she met him, there was no arrogance left in his face, only shame. "This can't be true," Amara whispered. But deep down, pieces of her life suddenly started making sense. The reason her mother never fully spoke about Kareem, the fear she carried for years, the old photographs she had carefully inside locked drawers, even the way Samira used to avoid answering questions about Amara's father whenever she asked as a child. Omar stepped closer quietly. "Your mother wanted to tell you many times," he said gently, but she feared what powerful people could do back then. After the fire, everyone connected to the case was terrified. Amara looked at Kareem with tears building in her eyes. "You knew?" Kareem lowered his head slowly. "I found out shortly before the fire." His voice cracked slightly. "Samira and I cared about each other during those difficult years in Dubai. But everything became complicated when the company problems started. Then the fire happened. Omar disappeared, and fear controlled every decision after that." Amara felt anger, sadness, and confusion all at once. "You left us," she said quietly. Kareem didn't defend himself. "I did," he admitted, "and it's the greatest regret of my life." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Back inside the ballroom, police investigators and financial authorities had already arrived after Kareem's public confession. News channels across the world covered the billionaire CEO scandalive as investors reacted to the shocking revelations surrounding the Dubai fire mystery. But strangely, the story touching people the most online wasn't about money or corruption. It was a story of a hotel maid who stood up with dignity after being insulted. The viral video of Amara's calm Arabic response spread everywhere. Millions praised her composure, intelligence, and courage. People from different backgrounds connected with her story because it reminded them how quickly society judges people based on appearance, job titles, or status. A week later, Kareem officially stepped down as CEO of his company while cooperating fully with investigators, reopening the old corruption case. Several former executives connected to the stolen investment funds were also exposed through the evidence hidden inside the briefcase for 11 years. Omar finally cleared his name after being declared dead for over a decade. But for Amara, the biggest change was personal. She didn't suddenly become interested in wealth or luxury because of the DNA truth. Instead, she chose to honor her mother's memory in a different way. Using support from legal compensation tied to the reopened case, she opened a scholarship foundation in Samira's name for immigrant workers and low-income students struggling to continue their education. The same woman once ignored as just a maid became an inspiration to millions. Months later, Amara stood quietly inside a small community classroom watching students study languages, technology, and business skills. On the wall hung a framed photo of Samira, smiling warmly. Kareem occasionally visited the foundation too, though never with cameras or media. Their relationship remained complicated, healing slowly over time through difficult conversations and honesty rather than money. One evening, as Amara locked the classroom after another long day, she remembered the moment everything changed. The second a billionaire insulted her in Arabic, believing she would stay silent. But her response didn't just leave him speechless. It forced hidden truths into the light, reunited broken pieces of the past, and reminded countless people around the world that respect for others matters far more than power, wealth, or status ever will.